Okay, here we go. So we are going to be looking at this unit. We're going to be looking at polynomials. This unit 8 is actually broken up into two different units. So we're only going to have a couple days worth of material before we test again. So the first part we're going to look at is adding and subtracting, and then we're going to look at multiplying and dividing next time. Okay, so let's look at what these words mean. First, we're going to look at monomial. So notice that mono, y'all should know that that means one. Okay, so this is a number variable or the product of a number and one or more variables. Basically, it's a term that has no addition or subtraction sign. That could be just a number, like 3. That could be this whole term, negative 8x. That could be x squared, 1 to the 5th z. That could be 2x over 9. Those are all considered to be monomials because there's nothing being added or subtracted to it. A polynomial, poly, is going to mean many. Okay, basically many numbers. A monomial, or the addition or subtraction of 2 or more monomials. Okay, so you see here we've got 4 different terms, so that makes it a polynomial. Okay, we're going to look at what a leading coefficient is. You already know what a coefficient is, but a leading coefficient is the coefficient of the first term in a polynomial that is written with exponents of a variable decreasing from left to right. So here's what that means. Okay, if you notice these exponents, you've got a 4, a 2, a 1, and a 0, a nothing. Okay, so notice your exponents are going in decreasing order. That's the way that you're going to want to write your answers to all these problems that we work, from biggest exponent down to the smallest. So your leading coefficient here would be 3. Okay, we're going to talk about the degree of a monomial. The degree is the sum of the exponents of the variables of the monomial. Okay, so we're going to look at this number 3. Okay, think about what exponent is on this 3. Really, it's just a 0. So your degree here is 0. Now, if we look at negative 8x, there's a 1 on that, so our degree is 1. Now, this next one's a little tricky because you've got a 2 on your x, a 5 on your y, and we have a 1 on the z that you can't see. Okay, and think about what that definition said. It said the sum of the exponents of the variables of the monomial. So if I take the sum of all these exponents, I have 2 plus 5 plus 1, so my degree is 8. Okay, so that's the degree of just a monomial, just one term. The degree of a polynomial, so the degree of the whole thing, is the greatest degree of the terms in a polynomial. Okay, so here's your example. So let's look, we're going to look at each monomial separately, and then we're going to see what the degree of the whole thing is. Okay, so the degree of 3x to the 4th, y to the 3rd. I have a 4 and I have a 3. So the degree there is 7. The 5x squared y, I have a 2 and I have a 1 on the y. 2 plus 1 would be 3. On the negative 7x, I have a 1. Okay, so my degree there would be 1. And here I don't have an exponent, so my degree would be 0. Okay, the degree of the whole polynomial is going to be the greatest degree of the terms, which means the greatest degree is 7. So this says, write 7 plus 2x to the 4th minus 4x so that the exponents decrease from left to right. Identify the degree and the leading coefficient of the polynomial. All right, so here we go. We're going to write this from the exponents from the biggest to the smallest. So we want to see what term has the biggest exponent. All right, the 2x to the 4th does. So I'm going to write that first. Now that's positive 2x to the 4th. So I'm going to have 2x to the 4th. I'm going to cross that out so I know I've used it. Then I have a minus 4x. And then my last term that doesn't have an exponent would be plus 7. So all you're doing is just rewriting that from biggest exponent going down to the lowest. Okay, now if I want to identify the degree, I'm going to look at this first term. The sum of the exponents of the first term, my degree here would be 4. And my leading coefficient, so I'm just going to write LC, my leading coefficient, that's the coefficient at the very front, would be 2. Okay, so let's look at number 1 down here. I need to write this from biggest exponent down to the smallest. So I'm going to have 8x cubed. Then it looks like I'm going to have 5x next, so plus 5x. And then I have plus 13. You're just rearranging these to go from biggest exponent down to the lowest. Okay, if I wanted the degree of this, my degree would be 3. So the degree would be 3, and the leading coefficient would be 8. On number 2, I'm going to need to start with the highest exponent, which is 5. So that's a negative 7y to the 5th. Next would be the 4y to the 4th. And then last would be the plus 2y. Okay, my degree here would be 5. My leading coefficient is negative 7. All right, this says, tell whether the expression is a polynomial. If it is a polynomial, find its degree and classify it by the number of terms. Tell why it is not a polynomial. Okay, we're going to skip some of this. We're not going to do all of this, but I'm just going to point out a few things. So here we go. We're going to start with negative 6, and we're going to ask, is it a polynomial? No, this isn't. This is a monomial, but because it's just one term, it can't be considered poly, because poly means many. Okay, B, m to the negative 3 plus 4. This is actually not a polynomial, and what I want you to write down is, it already says no, but I want you to say because it has a negative exponent. Negative exponent. Okay, if it has a negative exponent, it is not considered to be a polynomial. Okay, if you look at negative h cubed plus 4h squared, yes. Okay, we're not going to classify these by the degree, but we are going to say there's a special name for some of these. I could call this a polynomial, but because there are 2 terms here, we can actually call this a binomial. So 2 terms, you can also call it a binomial. So looking at this next one, notice it has 3 terms. So what do you think that's called? A trinomial. Okay, in E, it says, is it a polynomial? No, it's not. And it's not because W. So it's because there's a variable as an exponent. I'll just say variable in exponent. So it's not considered to be a polynomial. All right, now we're going to fill out this little table. We're going to get the degree, the number of terms, and the name using the number of terms. Okay, so the polynomial is 3x plus 5. Okay, we talked about degree already. The degree here would just be 1. The number of terms, we've got 2, which means we can call this a binomial. Okay, the second one, 4x squared plus 3x plus 7. My highest degree exponent is 2. There's 3 terms, which means I can call this a trinomial. Okay, this third one, negative 2x cubed. Okay, so we've got negative 2x cubed. So here I can see my degree is 3. I just have 1 term, which means I can call this a monomial. So those are the 3 main ones you have. You got monomial, trinomial, and binomial. Okay, so since we've seen this next one's also going to be a binomial, so we're just not going to do that one. And if you see 4, so just a number, our degree here would be 0. I have 1 term, which means it's also a monomial. Okay, you might also see just a number be called a constant. But technically it's still a monomial. Now we're going to be talking about like terms. Now, to be a like term, the term has to be exactly the same. Okay, so an x squared and an x, those are not exactly the same. An x cubed and an x to the fourth, those are not exactly the same. So we're going to identify like terms, and we're going to see if we can combine them or not. Okay, so here we go. We've got 2x squared and we have plus 3x squared. So notice those are both x squared, which means I can add these. Now, think about to the last unit. We had to do exponent rules before we do this, so we know what to do with the exponents. Okay, we only changed exponents last unit when we were multiplying or dividing or taking a power to a power. We never added. We never added two things together. You haven't seen that yet. So here, I'm going to keep the term the same, x squared. I have 2x squared plus 3x squared. All that gets me is 5x squared. Okay, you're not going to touch that exponent. Okay, let's look at number 2. I've got 3xy plus 4yx. Now, I know this yx looks like it's different, okay, but those still are being multiplied together, so I could say that that is xy. So if I have 3xy plus 4xy, that gets me 7xy. Okay, now number 3. Now this one's a little bit tricky. I have 2a squared b plus 5ab squared. Now notice I have a squared b here and ab squared here. Those are not the same. So if you saw this on a question, this would just be your final answer. There's nothing you can do to that because those are already, they're not like terms. All right, number 4. Now remember, we wanted to write our answers from the highest exponent down to the lowest exponent. Okay, so I'm going to first look at let's look at x squareds. Do we have any other x squareds? Okay, so we've got 5x squared. And this is always good to maybe like circle or put a square or something around your like terms. I've got 5x squared and I have a negative 7x squared. Okay, so I have 5 minus 7. That gets me negative 2x squared. Okay, I'm going to mark those out so I don't use them again. Okay, now normally, so since we write these going from the highest exponent down to the lowest, I'm going to do my x and then now I'm going to do my y squareds. Okay, so I can get all my squareds out of the way. So I've got an 8y squared and a 4y squared. So that's a positive 12y squared. I'm going to mark those out. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my x's. So I've got a 2x and a negative 3x. So that's going to get me negative 1x, or just negative x. I'm going to mark those out. And then I have a 4y plus 7y, so that gives me 11y. Now, if you did write these in a different order, it's not necessarily wrong. It's just assumed that you need to write it in this order, from the highest exponent down to the lowest. Okay, now we're going to look at adding polynomials. So we're going to take something with 2 or 3 or 4 terms and add it to something else that has 2 or 3 or 4 terms. Now remember what I just said about adding, where you're not going to touch the exponents. So the first step is we're going to remove the parentheses and rewrite each term. That's going to be really important for when we actually see minuses. And then we're going to combine like terms. So this positive, it's just like I'm multiplying a positive out to all these things. I know it doesn't seem like it's that difficult of a concept, but when it's a minus, you are going to have to definitely distribute that. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared plus x plus 8 and distribute a positive. So I'm going to remove the parentheses, so I have plus x squared minus x minus 1. Basically nothing has changed. I'm just taking out those parentheses. Now we're going to combine our like terms. So I have x squared plus x squared. Now that's 1x squared plus 1x squared, which gives us how many? 2x squared. Mark those out. Now I'm going to look for my x's. I have an x and a minus x. So that's basically 1 minus 1, which is 0. So those are gone. And then I have an 8 and a minus 1, which gets me plus 7. is our answer. So all we're doing is removing those parentheses and then we're combining like terms. So here we go. I'm going to work on this next one. I'm going to distribute this positive 1 to everything. So I've got 4x cubed plus x squared minus 5 plus 7x plus x cubed minus 3x squared. So really nothing changed there. Okay, now I'm going to combine my like terms. Start with the highest exponent. So I have a 4x cubed and an x cubed. Now notice that's 4 plus 1, so that's 5x cubed. Now we're going to go down to our x squared. I have a 1x squared and a negative 3x squared, so that's minus 2x squared. Now I'm going to go down to the x's. The only x I have is this positive 7x. And then the only thing I have left is this minus 5. And there's our answer. Just double check your answer at the end. Make sure you don't still have multiple of the same term. So notice we have a x cubed, an x squared, an x, and a constant. So we know we're done. Okay, we are actually, I'm going to skip all this. Okay, if you need more examples, just go back and watch the examples that I just did. So we're going to mark these out just to save some time on the video. Okay, now here's where it gets really important that you remove those parentheses. Okay, notice here I have 4z squared minus 3 minus all of this stuff to the right. Okay, so this minus, it's like I have a negative 1 out there. So that needs to get distributed to everything. Okay, so it's very important you do that here. So I have 4z squared minus 3. Now I'm going to distribute that negative. So I have a negative times negative 2z squared. That's going to get me a positive 2z squared. I have a negative times 5z. That gets me minus 5z. And I have a negative times a negative 1, which gets me positive 1, because we're multiplying. Now I'm going to combine my like terms. So I have a 4z squared and a 2z squared. So that's 6z squared. I have a negative 5z. So that's going to be minus 5z. And I have a negative 3 plus 1, which gets me minus 2. And we're done. All right, so let's do this one. I'm going to distribute this negative. So I have 3x squared plus 6x minus 4. And distribute that negative. So it's going to be minus x squared. Negative times a negative x is going to be positive x, and then a negative times a negative 7 is positive 7. And now we combine our like terms. So I have a 3x squared minus x squared, so that's 2x squared. You don't have to do these circles if you don't want to, but I would suggest at least marking them out if you've already combined them. That way you know you're done. Then I have a 6x plus x, so that's 7x. And then I have a negative 4 plus 7, which gives me positive 3. There's our answer. Okay, again, I'm going to skip all these just to save some time. But if you need more examples to do, they're there for you. All right, here we go. We're going to do about, I think, 7 questions together here. All different types of using these rules that we just learned. So here we go. I've got x plus 4 minus 2 minus x. All right, so here we go. I'm going to distribute that minus sign. So I have x plus 4 minus 2 plus x. We're going to combine our like terms. So I have an x plus an x. How many x's do we have? We have 2, so that's 2x. And then I have 4 minus 2, which gets me 2. So our answer here is 2x plus 2. All right, number 2. Okay, now I notice this is a plus sign. If you want to distribute it, you can, but nothing's going to change. So if you want to just go ahead and start combining like terms, you can. So I have a 2x squared plus 9x squared. That gets me 11x squared. Then I have a 9x plus a 2x, so that gets me 11x. And then I have a 5 and a minus 5, which gets me 0. So my answer here is B. Now don't let fractions freak you out because we do have calculators that can add these for us if we need it. So we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to start, I could distribute that plus sign, but again, nothing's going to change, so I'm going to go ahead and just add these. So I have 3 over 3. Notice 3 over 3, that's really just 1. Okay, it's really just 1d squared. So I've got 3 over 3d squared plus 3 over 2d squared. So really that's 1 plus 3 over 2. And if I do 1 plus 3 over 2 in my calculator, that's going to get me 5 over 2 d squared. Mark those out. And then I have 2/5 d plus 1/5 d. And those are, they have a common denominator, so those are easy to add. That would be 3/5 d. There we go. There's our answer. Number 4, express the perimeter of the scalene triangle as a polynomial. So let's think about what perimeter means. Perimeter means, let's just talk in general. Perimeter is add all the sides. Add all the sides. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and write all of this out. You may just want to look at the triangle and add them all up, but I'm going to go ahead and do this. So I've got 2x squared plus 4x plus 6x squared plus 5 plus 3x minus 6. Just so I can get it all laid out there for me. Okay, I'm going to look at my x squared. So I've got 2x squared plus 6x squared. So that's 8x squared. I have a 4x plus a 3x. So that's 7x. And then I have 5 minus 6, which gets me minus 1. So this is our perimeter. You're not going to actually get a number. You're going to still have variables in it. Okay, number 5, this one's similar. So if 3 side lengths of a triangle are A, that's the first side, is A. The second side is 4 times 6a plus 2b squared. And here's the third side, a squared minus 6b squared. Express the perimeter. All right, so we've got this triangle. One side is A, one side is 4 times 6a plus 2b squared, and one side is a squared minus 6b squared. Okay, now before we add all these sides up, there's something we have to do. Notice this side that I just drew on the bottom. Okay, I have to first distribute this 4 and get this side simplified. So if I distribute that 4, that side is now going to be 24a plus, I'm just going to multiply the 4 and the 2 here, and that gives me 8b squared. Now I'm going to add all of these up. So I have a, that's that first side. So I have a plus a squared minus 6b squared plus that bottom side, which is 24a plus 8b squared. Now we're going to start combining. Okay, so I have this a squared. That's my only one, so I have a squared. Now I'm going to go to my b squares. I have a negative 6b squared and an 8b squared. So negative 6 plus 8 is 2. So plus 2b squared. And then I have an a and a 24a. So 1 plus 24 gives me 25a. Okay, now notice our answer choices are a little bit different. It looks like they go with all the a's and then they give a b. Okay, but our answer here would be D. All right, number 6. Okay, given the segment EF, if the length of EF is 8x cubed plus 3. All right, here we go. Let's draw what this is saying. So it's saying EF, the whole thing is 8x cubed plus 3. And the length of EC, so this little piece here, just EC is 4x squared plus 3x cubed. And they want us to find the length of CF. All right, so let's think about this. We have the whole thing. We have 8x cubed plus 3, and we have a little piece. How do we find the other piece? We're going to subtract them. You have to be very careful here. Do not try to do this in your head, okay, because you're going to miss something. You need to write this out. So we're going to have 8x cubed plus 3 minus. We need minus this whole side, which means that whole side needs to go in parentheses. So minus 4x squared plus 3x cubed. This does end up popping up on tests and quizzes and homework, so you've got to know this. So when you subtract, you need to subtract the whole thing, which means now that negative needs to get distributed. So we have 8x cubed plus 3 minus 4x squared minus 3x cubed. And now we can start to combine like terms. So I have an 8x cubed minus 3x cubed, which gets me 5x cubed. I have this negative 4x squared, which would go next, and then I have the plus 3 at the end. And there's the missing side. If you wanted to write that side in here, then you could add up EC and CF. Then it would have to be 8x cubed plus 3. That's a way that you could check it if you want to. Okay, number 7. Given the perimeter of a triangle is 5x plus 58, express the missing side length as a polynomial. Okay, so this is the same idea. I need to take the whole thing and I need to subtract out what I have. Okay, so let's go ahead and add up these two sides that we have. So I have 2x and an x, so that's going to get me 3x. And then I have a 26 and a minus 5, which is going to get me 21. Okay, so those two sides added together is 3x plus 21. So we need to take what the whole thing is, which is 5x plus 58, and subtract out the whole thing that we have, which is 3x plus 21. Okay, if I start working this out, I need to distribute that minus sign first. So I have 5x plus 58 minus 3x minus 21, and I combine my like terms. So I have a 5x and a minus 3x, which is 2x, and a 58 minus 21, which gets me 37. So again, here, I could write this side in if I wanted to, and add up all those three sides, and they need to be 5x plus 58, just to check. All right, last thing we're going to talk about is how to distribute a monomial. So we're going to be distributing one term to a polynomial. Okay, and here's how we're going to do that. You have to remember your exponent rules. That's why we learned them already, because it's going to come in handy right now. Okay, when you're multiplying, remember that you add exponents. You multiply the coefficients, and we're going to add the exponents. That's going to be no different here. Okay, there's just going to be kind of a lot going on, so you have to take this slow. So I've got 3x cubed times 2x cubed. Now notice we are multiplying, so I have to do 3 times 2, that's 6. When multiplying, we add exponents. So I have 6x to the 6. All right, I'm done with that first term. Now I have to do 3x cubed times negative x squared. Okay, well that's 3 times a negative 1, which is going to be minus 3. I add my exponents and get x to the 5th. I'm done with that. Now this is going to go to the third term. So I have 3x cubed times a negative 7x. So that's minus 21x to the 4th. Don't forget about that little 1 on the 7x. Okay, and then the last term, I've got 3x cubed times negative 3, which is going to get me a negative 9, and then I still have that x cubed on it. Okay, make sure we don't have any like terms here. I don't. I have a 6th power, a 5th power, a 4th power, and a 3rd power, so we are done. Notice how easy that was. We just multiplied the coefficients and added the exponents. Okay, we're not going to do all of these, but I'm going to do a couple. So let's do, we'll do A and C. Mark out B and D. All right, so here we go. I've got 4b times 5b squared. So I'm going to multiply the coefficients. That gets me 20. I'm going to add my exponent. That's going to get me b cubed, because I've got a 1 on this b. I'm going to do 4b times b. So that's just 4 times 1 is 4. B. Now notice I have 1 on the original, and I have 1 here. So that gets me b squared. And then I have 4b times 6, which gets me 24. I have no like terms, so that's my answer. Now let's go down to C, and this will be the last one we do. So I've got 2x times x squared, so that's going to get me 2x cubed if we add the exponents. I have 2x times a negative 6x, so it's going to be minus 12x squared. Don't forget about those ones. Okay, Okay, and then I have 2x times 5. That one's easy because I just do 2 times 5, which gets me 10x. Make sure you don't have any like terms, and if you don't, there's our answer. Okay, if there's anything you don't get in this, then go back and watch this again, but you should be able to do your homework. Your homework will still be due next time, and I will see you next week.